the guarantees and other innovating financing modes should be tapped for this purpose. Thank you very much.
Dr. Hussain, thank you very much. So finance plays a vital part, but we shouldn't go too much into debt in trying to get that done. And echoing the comments of some of the other panelists, the private sector has a role to play here. Prioritize interventions, you said, Dr. Hussain, at the water, food, and energy nexus was an interesting perspective. And also, once again, the comments about the role of politicians. Institutions and governance play a key part in all of this. So let's finish off this cycle of conversations by maybe addressing institutions and governance a little bit further. Our final keynote address here tonight is from Senator Dr. Musaddiq Malik, the Federal Minister for Climate Change and Environmental Coordination. Minister, please. Warm round of applause, folks.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to be here. I'm new to climate, and I've come a long journey from very dark brown to green. And the other day, Madam Secretary was asking me, how does it feel? And I said, too green. I'm green at it, and it feels too green. So I would take a little bit more of a foxy view, as in not a foxy view, but a folksy view on climate. When I came for my first day at the ministry, I asked myself, what is climate to me? What is environment to me? And I thought about it. And I thought of that time when my brothers and we used to run around in the little garden that we had. And we used to capture jugnu, fireflies. And we'd put them in a bottle, and then we'd turn the lights off, take them inside, and then we'll see them. And we'd be fascinated. And then someone would say, hey, it's a glass jar, what if they die? And then we'll run out and we'd release them. To me, that was climate. To me, we'll run in little parks everywhere in Lahore and catch butterflies. And we'd keep those butterflies for a little while and then release them. To me, that was climate. We used to go to the rivers with friends as we were growing up, and to canal in Lahore, very beautiful canal. And all of us would dive in, because we thought the water was pristine, it was clean. And people who knew less, our older generation, our parents' generation, would tell us that flowing water is pak. And there'd be people who drink from that water without any concerns. They would take tarboos, they would throw tarboos into the river, they would pull them out, they'd sit by the canal side, and they'll eat that tarboos after a round of swimming. To me, that was climate. An early morning mist. Our school was in Model Town, and we'd go from Gulberg to Model Town, and it would be misty. And you saw trees and you saw leaves, and if you touched them, you felt the wetness of mist, not a cloud of dust. And that mystic idea, that mystic picture, Khalid Saab, one of the greatest painters, and Zulkarnain Haider, two of the greatest landscapists in Lahore, they would paint pictures of that mist. To me, that was the environment. And we used to come here to Islamabad, and there wasn't a spot that you could see on the Magla Hills. Not 1 inch of earth or dust or mud. It was all green. There were trees, and then there were trees, and then there were trees, and then there were trees, and you couldn't see the mountain. And to me, that was the environment. And we'd go and we'd never worry about the mercury levels in the fish. We never worried that some kind of crap coming from the industrial waste or human waste was flowing into river Ravi. Never worried about it. We celebrated eating khagga machli that everyone wants to now check and ensure that it's not from the river and it's from a farm. So at that point in time, no one worried about it. And people actually wanted the real river fish, not the farmed fish. To me, that was the climate. And if you ever dared to go to the northern areas, you wanted to spot bears in the mountains, you wanted to spot some who were really brave, wanted to spot leopards in the mountains in Gilgit-Baltistan. And to me, that was the climate. So I'll toggle between Urdu and English as I go along, because some ideas are very difficult to translate. And at my uncle's house, you know, they would pull the charpai out and all the kids would lie down and they would look at the sky and they could spot every single star. And that tale and that pattern, that discussion at night, when the stars were visible from Lahore, I'm not talking about some mountains in Gilgit-Baltistan. To me, that was the climate, that was the environment. So I don't look at climate from the point of weakness or vulnerability. I don't. There are dreadful stories of floods and food shortages and climate change and droughts and thousands of years of civilizations getting washed away and displacement of families, devastation, schools getting washed away, kids by tombs, helpless, hopeless, eating from whatever people would leave for them, living on the street. All of these things are right. But that doesn't inspire me. What inspires me is what I've shared with you. So when I've often wondered, I said the way we describe Pakistan and other poor countries or developing countries, and within Pakistan, the way we describe the poor people, particularly those who are living in the vulnerable areas of Pakistan, they should all be dead. Look at your descriptions. Look at how you describe them. Ask yourself, how are you describing poverty? How are you describing floods and displacements and devastations and droughts and food shortages? Why are these people not dead? They should be dead. And they're not. So there must be something very resilient about them. So when I look at this, I would like to look at it from the point of strength. Just the way when you go to the corporations and you look at their competitive advantage, and you look at their strengths and not their weaknesses, and you tell all of these large, grand, great, developed countries, as well as companies, to harness their competence, to harness their competitive advantage, their strength, and unleash it. Why is it that when we look at the vulnerable, we don't think about their strength and their resilience? And how, in spite of our elite discourse, these people over thousands of years have stayed resilient. They have withstood droughts, food shortages, floods, and yet they're there. So for me, the lens that I would prefer to and like to use for defining climate is that charpai where you can lie down and look at jagmag, 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 jagmag kehkashan. That is what we are committed to restoring. We are not going to just compensate for the weaknesses. We are going to reclaim. We're going to restore. Where are all of those hare tote gone? There was no tree in Islamabad that did not have that hare tote जो कभी लोग ले जाते हैं बोलने वाले कुछ ना बोलने वाले गुंगे बहरे. Where are those parrots gone? Where is that tradition where the elders, after a very difficult day in the sun, burning hot sun, plowing through those their small tracts of land, would sit under a tali tree or a peepal tree on a charpai and listen to heer while the bulbul sings? Where is all of that bulbul gone? Where are those singing birds gone? So for us, for me, restoration of everything which is not an ideal from some Alif Laila ki dastan. Restoration of what many who are my age have lived through. Restoring our past, claiming our childhood, claiming our joys, claiming our songs, claiming flowers, claiming color, claiming music. That theater, to me, is climate. And that is what we are committed to claiming back and restoring. That is our commitment to the nation. I'm not alone in this universe. You can have a choice to look at it, look at climate from a point of vulnerability, which is what I listen to all day long. Or you can choose to look at climate as an opportunity, and opportunity is such a cliched word, but from a lens of strength. I mean, about 30, 40 years ago, I've studied the innovation ecologies of a lot of different countries. And at one point in time, while I was looking at the innovation ecology of a particular country, I chose and elected to go to Finland. Because I was quite fascinated. This is the time when Nokia was happening, about a decade and a half, 2 decades ago. And I was quite fascinated by the bets that they were placing in terms of life sciences and medical devices and telephony and so on and so forth. And when I went there, and I went to Techies and then the Academy of Finland Academy of Sciences, and all of these places, in a quest to figure out how did it happen, I was informed that Finland was a forest economy. And because it was enormous, kind of a spread of forests, it basically developed a core competence in the area of rubbers and tires. And that required cutting of the trees and deforestation. And Nokia, I found out, was actually a tire company before it became a phone company. Now, when this deforestation started, Finland came up with the world's highest standards of environmental protection, highest standards that were not even required at that point in time. There was no European Commission, no European Union. And because of the highest standards that they set, they became the world's largest exporters of environmental technology to the world. Because the technology that was required to meet those standards, it existed nowhere but in Finland. And at one point in time, a third of the world's environmental technology was being exported by Nokia. They used their climate, they used their environment, they used their forests as a point of strength and built the most formidable cluster of environmental technology. Let me give you another example, not liked by many. Just about 2 decades ago, when we spoke about the dirtiest cities in the world, dirtiest cities, and people made fun of them, they were Beijing and Shanghai. People would say that they don't even go to the bathroom without masks because they can't breathe. And look at their journey. Now they're the world's largest exporters of solar technology. The largest exporters, single largest exporter of solar technology across the world is China, I believe followed by Germany. They use their environment, their climate, their cities, even their problems as a point of strength, and leveraged it to build a formidable cluster that generated employment, that made their cities clean, made them exporters. Finland, China, stories of thousands of years of resilience of the poor and developing economies against this narrative. You put this together and you begin to get your answer. That is our answer. We're going to elect to look at the world from this lens. We are going to use all of these vulnerabilities to build a formidable green economy in Pakistan. We're going to reclaim our forests, we're going to reclaim our deserts, we're going to reclaim our waters. And in that process, we're going to teach the world how to reclaim. That is the strength that we'd like to build over the next 5 to 10 years. Much like I'm not giving you phantom stories, I'm giving you real examples of real countries with real people. And what do you find about Pakistanis that is so unreal that we all are skeptical and don't have the confidence to say, yes, we can. So my friends, yes, we are going to. We may not have all the answers, we may not have all the technologies, we may not have all the financing, but by God, we're going to get it. Talking about financing, and Madam, with your permission, if you would allow me, Excellency, I look at financing in a slightly different way. I have a slant in my eye, and I've spoken about this at various fora, just over the past month or so that I've had this charge. I find many of the instruments across the world, first of all, I immensely appreciate every partner, particularly the World Bank, particularly the European Union, particularly the United Kingdom's support that has come into development, and even USAID, which I believe is not anymore. But while it was there, we appreciate every bilateral and every multilateral and every NGO that has strengthened our hands along this journey. We're very grateful. But there's also a little bit of hypocrisy here. The top 60, 30 plus 15, I'm particularly counting so that you can know which countries, 30 plus, 45% of the carbon emission of the world is by 2 countries. 2. And one of them has pulled the plug. 45% of the world's carbon burden, our vulnerability, the floods, the droughts, the civilizations, and the food shortages and all of that is 2 countries. And one of them has pulled the plug and said, we're out of it, you're on your own, we'd continue to do what we're doing, and they celebrated coal recently. And they said coal is more precious than gold. What about our coal? Why is our coal black and yours yellow with polka dots? I don't get it. It's coal. It's coal everywhere. And I cannot reconcile. I also think that Green Deal is a great deal. Great deal, perhaps one of the greatest deals. I'm talking about CBAM, which is a part of the Green Deal. But 7 countries or 10 countries of the world account for 70 to 80% of the carbon dioxide burden. 10 countries of the world account for about 70% of the carbon burden of the world. 85% of green financing is going to the same countries. And the rest of the world has 10 to 15% financing. Now, while we welcome all this Green Deal, and we are a part and committed to this Green Deal, if financing is not coming forth to Pakistan as one of the remaining 180 countries, how are they going to commit and shake hand on this Green Deal? If the financing is not available, if the countries that are polluting, Europe is not a big chunk of it, I want to qualify. But the countries that are basically polluting are the same countries that are getting the financing. are the same countries that are setting the standard, then a part of this Green Deal is just a new generation of industrial policy and not a Green Deal. It's an industrial deal. Because we are required to jump over a hump that we have not set, for which financing is not available, technology is not available, competence is not available, capability is not available, consulting is not available. And to do all of these things, basically financing is not available. So how do we do this? And if we're unable to do it, it becomes an industrial policy, because now it's a tariff game. Tariffs have become very popular. You know, what are those called? The affectionate reciprocal tariffs, unilateral tariffs, bilateral tariffs. But I don't think they're healthy for the world economy. So I think we welcome the Green Deal, we welcome green financing, and we look at all of our partners who are helping us enormously. We just had a green jobs and green skills workshop 2-3 days ago, and I was so impressed by one of the European countries, Germany, right, madam? Their developmental institution. So we're very grateful, but we would like the world to rethink and make sure that green is green and not just a hurdle. If it's a hurdle, you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If the developing economies of the world begin to look at all things green as a new policy hurdle to create hurdles in the way of their economic development, then the green is going to go with it. And we're going to go back to the 1980s, when the South's only strategy for environment and climate was to stall it. So we should not go back to the 1980s. We should move forward with the science and evidence and policies which are going to allow all of us to restore our planet. Our commitment, we're going to do it, as I said. We're going to do it with our partners or without our partners, because we are doing it for our own children. We're doing it for our own country. We're doing it for our own strengths, and we're doing it for our own vulnerabilities. If we do it with our partners, it might take us 10 years, 5 years. If we do it without these partners, it may take us 10 years, 15 years. But by God, we're going to do it, because we're doing it for our own children. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you very much indeed. That wraps up this particular panel of discussion, the opening salvo in what's going to be an afternoon of climate conversation. The next will be a panel discussion where we'll actually discuss some of these issues rather than presentations. But for the moment, I'd like to give a presentation to our panelists and show them our thanks with a little souvenir that we're going to give to each of them. And Asfar and Amir, if you would please join us on the stage for that ceremony. And presenting the souvenirs on this occasion will be our guest, Sadia Dada, the Chief Distribution and Marcoms Officer at K Electric, if you would also join us on the stage. And ladies and gentlemen, one more time, show your appreciation to our speakers today, Aisha Humaira Chowdhury, Helen Brand, Dr. Reena Kionka, Dr. Ishrat Hussain, Senator Dr. Musaddiq Malik. Warm round of applause, please, folks. A bit more passion there. Once again, our thanks to our speakers this afternoon as they take a final group photograph. So folks, we'll move on from the presentations. Our next session will be an interactive one, a discussion about climate and sustainability. Once we've got some space, we'll make room for our panelists. Okay, so the next panel is a dialogue on climate and sustainability. I'd like to invite onto the stage our next panelists for this conversation. They are Dr. Samuel Rizk, Resident Representative for Pakistan of the United Nations Development Programme. Dr. Rizk, to the stage if you would. ISLAMABAD is the Global President of the ACCA and the founder and CEO of Planative. I hope they're both here. Dr. Samuel Rizk of the UNDP, ISLAMABAD of Planative. Our other panelists are Maya Inayat Ismail, the Chairperson, Sustainability Forum, HBL, and Chairperson of HBL Microfinance Bank. Maya Ismail, if you would join us on the stage, please. Umar Hassan Khan is the CEO of Dowlance. Sadia Dada is the Chief Distribution and Marcoms Officer of K Electric, who's only just left the stage and is coming straight back. And moderating our panel today is Sajid Aslam, who's a partner at Spectreco from the US. Over to you. Folks, let's give a welcome to our panel discussion, please. A warm round of applause. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Great, thank you. I think the session before has already set the tone and raised the key concerns as well as the opportunities. I would like to raise one thing. When we are navigating the unknown, the biggest power the unknown brings that it make everybody equal. Nobody knows what the right solution is. And that basically create a unity and collective action to solve that problem which is unknown today. And the climate is one of a key area which is unknown. We don't know how it will evolve. We can only assess the risk, but we cannot exactly know what is going to happen and when with the certainty. And the disasters which we have seen in the past, they were of such a huge magnitude that the losses which we have suffered in a different part of the world We don't want that to happen again. And that will again require a collective action. And just picking up a couple of things, Madam Aisha, Secretary, raised that they want to make Pakistan as a part of the delivery center for the climate one. So while we are working as a SPECRECO has a delivery center in Pakistan for climate and working for US, Europe, and Middle Eastern clients. Similarly, the capacity building, the talent which we are using here is developed in Pakistan by using the content which is created in Pakistan, and now they are advising the governments, investors, and the businesses around the world. And picking up on Pakistan specifically, like under the current situation, and I'll start with you, Dr. Samuel, being a part of the International Development Agency and Musaddiq Malik, Minister, MOC, Ministry of Climate Change, he raised one concern that how the development agencies are contributing. He thanked them as well, and he also raised a concern about whether it's going to be another industrialization policy going forward, how UNDP is going to work in Pakistan or working in Pakistan and addressing those climate vulnerability, keeping in mind that what is our background and what are our opportunity and constraints. So what are the key initiatives UNDP bringing which can help address the climate vulnerability of Pakistan?
Thanks very much, Sajid. Thank you to the forum's organizers for joining. This is my first time here. Very pleased to join. So maybe I'll share a couple of things and then speak a little bit about UNDP because I think it builds on the previous work. The idea that something catastrophic may or may not happen, I think the likelihood of something happening is more likely than not. So often in relation to climate change, we talk about when, not if. And Pakistan particularly is prone to many different things. I think we heard that earlier, flood, drought, tsunami watch, earthquake watch, many other things happening. So I think more and more the discussion should be about prevention and preparedness than it is about recovery. And I think that's where the discussion that we are having today is really quite important in light of the global changes that are happening, whether they relate to finance or global policy and other. I think for Pakistan, it is astounding and perhaps a lesson learned that in one single event, you can lose about 2,000 lives, you can lose $30 billion worth of loss and damage, future, you can lose 2 million houses, 2+ million houses. But this is the same Pakistan which over the last 1.5 years has had a remarkable turnaround from the brink of default, financially speaking, in just about 1.5 years to where we are now, sustainable. And I think it is important to realize that there's a particular difference between where sometimes Pakistan appears financially and some of the broad and important and critical messages and some of the realities on the ground when you talk to people either who are continuing to be vulnerable to climate change or poverty, etc. And I think there are some of these discrepancies that need to be bridged to a great extent. At UNDP, I think there are 3 things that are important to mention, many of which are happening with the Ministry of Climate Change. Secretary Aisha spoke about this a little bit. There's the part about data and analysis, the baseline, having numbers to be able to actually do good, solid work. Secondly, there's the policy and advocacy. And third, there is the programming part. On data and analysis and policy and advocacy, our work supports the government's work. Our work supports the national agenda for climate change, whether it's on nationally determined contributions, reducing emissions by 2030, how much money comes from abroad, how much money is invested here, how much the transition to clean energy happens, and I think that is an important distinction. The agenda that UNDP or the UN system has on climate change is not our own agenda, it's the national agenda that needs to be supported. I often say we joke around in UNDP that if it's not a project, it does not exist. And that's where I think this link between policy and programming and data into actual initiatives and projects and programs is really quite important. Big discussion that's happening, hopefully together next week we'll be up in GB visiting a big project, glacial lake outburst floods. 6 or 7 years running, and it's a critical program for the lives and livelihoods of everyone living in the north. And this is just one programming that I think is important because it symbolizes almost everything that was mentioned earlier. Water in Pakistan as a source of life, and in many cases, if you're part of a glacier flood, it's a source of death. And this is one of those things that I think is really quite important and unique to Pakistan. I've learned quite a bit by some visits to the north on things that I'd never heard of before, because I too do not come from the climate change part. But other than early warning systems, many of which are set up, other than preserving the glaciers, we work in 36 valleys, but there are 13,000 glaciers that we have already identified in some of our work. The prevention, preserving lives, early warning systems are really quite important, but also many different nature-based solutions that look like ice stupas, glacier grafting, slope stabilization. All of these are local indigenous solutions to some of the biggest problems that actually exist. So I would say if we're looking at the crisis that is looming, it is there, it's likely going to happen. What do we do about it? Prevention is much more important at this point than recovery. And thirdly, if we're looking at really, really good programming, this country has excellent programming that just needs to be scaled up. I think there is a global international financial imperative related to this, which is how do global partners support, whether it's in the UN system or other funds like GCF or GEF, etc. But also I think this is an important forum to be able to have these discussions with the business community, because a lot of the solutions and maybe the majority of the financing in the future will come from here. It is either government spending, or in many cases it will actually be private sector spending, because in many cases I would say the private sector here has already migrated from the idea that we're only doing charity to CSR. We're actually now much engaged in sustainable development goals.
No, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Simon. I'll come back to you around the data and the impact assessment. That is there any challenge? Are we getting that data? Is there a right kind of information which we can share with in terms of the progress? It's auditable or not? And that's bringing me to you specifically when we are talking about private sector and the businesses. There are so many different standards, regulations, and the codes which are in play, even in Pakistan, starting from State Bank, very good initiative on a green banking, ESRM, then SECP has got IFRS. Recently, government also came up with very good code around the energy efficiency at a provincial level and at a national level. All those things create a certain challenge for the organization to really assess their risk and then make it comparable and the data which is reliable. So how you see as a ACCA, as an accountant, and you are also working a lot in the sustainability space, so how you see that integration of the public-private sector and bringing these standards and the reporting and the data and the assurance thing out in terms of the risk assessment and reporting?
Thank you, Sajid. First of all, I would like to congratulate all the organizers, Asfar and the team, Nutshell, for this another remarkable event. So I would say that how the private sector views climate now is actually, one, a business opportunity. Second is to absolutely hedge the risks, because there are no other way to look at this. Because if we want to sort of grow our businesses or sort of not be impacted by disrupted supply chains or weather events, or with regards to, say, not having the predictable costs, businesses and industries cannot move forward. Another very important consideration is that the world does not have immense resources in terms of which will actually go into the industries to cater to the 8 billion and the growing population, which means that we again need to look at the concept of circularity. We again need to look at that how resources can be optimized, how costs can be sort of brought down, which is like obviously every industry is impacted by the energy costs. And here we are sitting in a country where we have lots of challenges with regards to the energy costs that are very high. We have the hugest amount of potential coming from climate-friendly energy solutions, whether it is wind, solar, whether it is bioenergy, or it is likes of these. And when we need to look at the growth of business, gone are the days when we were only looking at that in a national context. Now businesses look at what is happening globally and what are the kind of regulations that are being enacted globally. Because of things like CBAM and many others, businesses here and obviously the supply chains can be tracked all the way back to the source. So this is of course, a small amount of risk, but a huge amount of opportunity. So I believe that industries and businesses, they now very clearly understand that what is the future, why this imperative is there for them. There is, when we look at any of the industry, whether it is the manufacturing sector, whether it is the supply chains, whether it is the services, and within the manufacturing, we have various industries. We have the white goods sector, we have many other types of manufacturing, of course, looking at the export-oriented manufacturing, textiles, of course, being one of them. When we look at the food industry, I know this conference is majorly supported by one of the food sector majors. All these companies, they are vulnerable to the risk of climate. So I think there's a lot of linkage, the business and industry linkage to the climate, energy and minerals, and now in Pakistan, we are on a transformational sort of path for developing our mineral resources. Pakistan is one of the biggest reservoirs for copper. Copper is needed for energy transition. Copper is needed for climate resilience. So I actually see this personally, of course, as a huge opportunity. And my take on this is that the level of awareness that businesses have and using the right kind of tech, AI-driven analysis, I think there's a lot of predictability that can happen. So I think in a nutshell, it is actually an opportunity.
Thank you, Ayla. And I think all these reporting standards and the regulations which are evolving right now with the consultation, that help us to bring this risk out and also look at the opportunity side, like you rightly mentioned, that where the opportunities are also coming out. Sadi, coming to you, coming from the K Electric, and I'll pick up something which Justice Aisha was talking this morning very specifically, narrative building. She stressed a lot this morning that until we build the narrative right, it's very difficult to really get everybody along on that journey. And you are coming from a communication side, and you have got such a great story coming from K Electric, from a grassroots level, and you have worked at a level where at least a distribution company never thought about it, right? How we can bring that narrative out and how we can really talk about something which Ayla picked up, that how we can conserve energy and getting into the energy efficiency side of it, as well as taking care of our community and making sure the people are doing things ethically, whatever they are doing, and how this narrative can be built not only as a communication tool, but as a tool which can generate the systemic change within that community where you are operating.
So thank you, and I think this was probably Justice Aisha's first such public appearance. I think everybody in the hall is rooting for more. So want to thank Asfar and Nutshell for making that happen. On the communication side of things, and don't get me wrong, I think climate change, the narrative has been around for quite some time, and we've got the Kyoto Protocol, we've got the Paris Agreement, it's 10 years done, we've got multiple more COPs. I think one happened in Dubai, one in Azerbaijan. I genuinely and honestly feel that this needs a rebrand. We've got the policy makers. I mean, they're not entirely, some sensitization, and there's policy driving, but the journey to the grassroots, it requires a massive rebrand. I mean, you can plan all you want on how you will save water and how you will conserve electricity, but if the bottom end user doesn't understand it, you've lost the plot. Climate change narrative, I mean, when it comes to user conversion, it has to be fun, it has to be localized, it has to be humanized, it has to be a brand that people own and adopt. And that's something where businesses can take a lead. We've done some programs at K Electric, so one of our biggest challenges is around urban infrastructure, and that comes with safety issues. There is excessive stress on the grid, and there's also loss of life due to safety. So we ran a door-to-door program, and then you have to root it in the local dynamics. Majority of my workforce is men. My operational timings are 9 to 5. When my staff goes door knocking, guess who opens the door? Well, they don't always open the door, they just say, go away. So we need to create that relevance. So we onboarded 50 women. They're now a 200 strong community. They've won global awards. They have touched almost 1 million households, saved hundreds of lives, and educated so many people. Just a cohort of 200 women reaching out to 1 million people and telling them, the dangers of using electricity improperly, going to schools and teaching our youth. I learned very early on in my career, if you want to save today, you can spend a lot of time convincing adults, but children are a lot more receptive. I think a lot more logical also. So we need to go to schools, and we need to create that sustainable leg of interaction with this population. I don't know how many were around in schools when there used to be this curriculum. There was this civic sense used to be taught in schools. It's no longer taught.
Yeah, it's not.
I think it needs to come back, and it needs to come back with vengeance, but garbed in how climate change affects people. Sajid, the sad reality is that a lot of people still think that, it's not my problem. It's really not my problem. But we have to cross that bridge. So that narrative building that Justice Aisha ji talked about, I think that will be the key to unlocking critical momentum, which at this point in time, we've got businesses on board. Ayla very rightfully said, businesses are very quick to spot opportunity if they see that this is going to sort of minimize their risks. A lot of them are using it to cut back on costs, and there is significant cost saving. We've seen that as well. We've deployed a lot of digital communication. So I have 500,000 users now going on to e-bills. That's that many less. I have to send out a bill every month. So you can imagine the amount of paper being saved. Somebody has to go and deliver that bill every single month. These things add up. So there is significant saving. The business case is there. So businesses will not have difficulty getting on board. But we have to make climate change consciousness exciting. And if I have the liberty to say sexy.
Now, I think very rightly pointed out. I think there are 2-3 things you highlighted in a very elegant way. Business case is an important thing. If the private sector has to mobilize, they should know that what and when they will make money or what risk they are avoiding, so what they are saving in that thing. And then you talked about the narrative, and it has to be humanized. We talked a lot in these sessions and sometime online around the NDCs. How many people are familiar with what is NDC, number one, and what's in it in Pakistan? Can you raise your hand? NDCs, if you know what it is, and number two, what's in it? Very few. So, Madam Secretary, that gives you an opportunity, And I think we raised that in a earlier session as well. NDC can't be delivered publicly. Private sector has to be mobilized. So they should pick up their sectors and initiative. And by the way, I'll suggest everybody go and read NDC. It's a lovely document. There's a great progress, and there are great initiatives which private sector can really leverage on. And their policy and support structure exists there. It's just the public and private sector engagement, and like Sadia picked up, make it easy for the business to understand where the opportunity. Don't tell them where the risk is. They will be scared. So just tell them that where the opportunity is, they thrive on that. So I think that's one of a key area from a narrative side, that this is something which I would suggest we should pick up. We will come to the questions again. We will go to Umar Saab. Umar Saab, just picking up on the Dollars, and we know that the Dollars has got a great history in terms of the sustainable manufacturing, in terms of not only the process, but the technology and the refrigeration gases which you are using. How you see that ecosystem evolving in Pakistan, where not only the Dollars, but your value chain, your customers, as well as your distributors and your vendor also get aligned in that, their capacity building and the investment which they may need that. So how this value chain impact we can generate using Dollars as an example.
Right. Thank you, Sajid, for that question. So the way I look at it, I think this conference today, the theme, which is navigating the unknown, really sustainability, because we're trying to act today for a tomorrow which is actually unknown. We don't know where we're heading. So this really truly is the essence of sustainability. To answer your question, I think we really need to understand that this truly is a man-made crisis. It's not an act of God. And if it's a man-made crisis, how it happened was because 100 years ago or 150 years ago, electricity came about. I'm sorry, Sadia, but that's one of the reasons why it happened. But we're also part of the problem. Then mechanized manufacturing started. Internal combustion engines came in. All these things have helped humanity develop in ways that was never done for centuries or even for all the known history before that. So the development that has happened and the progress that has humanity we've made in the last 150 years is more than the entire documented history of humanity. Now, but what is it? It has actually happened at the cost of environment and climate. And the science is very clear on that. 2024 was the hottest year on record. We actually hit the target which had been set of 1.5 degrees. It happened in 2024. So it's really facing us every day. Now, if we talk about our products and energy, I think we have to first understand that the 40% of all the global power consumption is coming from 4 product categories: refrigeration, heating and cooling, electric motors, and lighting, right? So it's refrigeration, heating and cooling, and motors, electric motors, and lighting. So these 4 contribute to almost 40% of the entire consumption of electricity. Now, we've done a lot of work, and I think one of the things that came out in discussion this morning as well, I think organizations like ourselves and many others have to now start designing solutions. We can't just be talking about the problem, and if we don't start designing solutions, we'll never get to a solution. And at Dollars and at our global company Beko, we actually invested heavily in R&D, and that's exactly what everyone else needs to be doing. We need to sort of split an organization into 3 scopes: scope 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the emissions. I feel scope 1 and 2 is the easy part, where you can go into green manufacturing and everything. It's the scope 3 which is the biggest challenge. And in my conversations with most people, a lot of people don't even know what scope 3 means. It's basically the product in use, the energy that's using when the consumer is using it. In our industry, 98% of our emissions are scope 3. Now, if we don't solve the scope 3 problem, we're not even moving anywhere. So making our plants energy efficient, putting solar panels in our factories is the easy part. It's the scope 3 which is the challenge, and this is where a lot of R&D investment is required. And today, I think there are best-in-class products available in the market which are able to, so for example, to the refrigerators that we sell today, use 50% less energy compared to 10 or 15 years ago, right? But there are 25 million refrigerators already in use in Pakistan. A large majority of them would be pre this change. Now, how do we make people understand that they need to upgrade, right? Similarly, for washing machines, now there are washing machines which use 60% less water. They're existing, right? No one talks about dishwashers. Dishwashers use, in one wash, 9.5 liters of water. The same dishes are washed with 125 liters of water under the tap. One dishwasher can save you almost 100,000 liters a year. Right? So when you start adding all things up, so my point is that through R&D, through innovation, all these products out there now, in best class, and not, now the challenge really is to how do we educate the consumers. We're running a campaign, we're talking about building better habits at home. We're trying to educate our customers to understand the sustainability side of the products as well. So the new products that are going out are obviously very sustainable, but the problem is the ones that already exist. And in our industry, the change cycle is much longer than most other industries. So people will not change that easily. So that really is the challenge. But we need to be committed to that 1.5 degrees because now with the 1.5 already being hit, I've already started hearing conversations, let's move that to 2. I wear my 1.5 degree commitment on my chest every day to make sure no one forgets that we still need to be committed to 1.5 degrees. And I think every company and every industry needs to understand their scope 3 challenge and address that.
I think definitely 1.5 is something which we are hitting, and 4 is something which already for some areas and cities is going. But I think the biggest thing which Dollars brought out, if you pick up that point, taking a responsibility for their product which is not used by them but used by the customer. And now they are tracking that what product is out there used by customer, which is paid by customer, where the electricity is being consumed by customer and paid by customer. But Dollars is saying, I need to reduce that emission. I need to reduce that electricity usage there. And that's what the scope 3 is all about. If all organizations started talking about their end of their life cycle of the entire product, so that will solve a lot of scenarios and issues which we are facing today, including the replacement and the recycling mechanism.
Absolutely.
There are organizations in the world, they have started getting into the replacement one, but there is a certain subsidies which are available to them for the financial side. And that's bring me to Anayat Ismail. Very interestingly, like Dollars picked up on that side, that there is a scope 3 which is generated because they are selling a certain product. If they don't sell it, that will not be there. If we assume that nobody else is selling that, right? Similarly, once we come to the financial sector, in a financial sector, the organization like the HBL or HBL Microfinance may not have that kind of emission, but the money they have deployed, there is a 700 times more emissions which they are generating. And with State Bank bringing the ESRM in place, and then IFRS coming as well, like SECP also bringing the reporting standard, which also require to report the finance emission there. How your organization is really screening the investment they are making, the portfolio which exists, like in terms of the equipment, there is a portfolio which exists which need to be replaced. Similarly, there are loans and the investments which are made earlier, they need to be replaced as well. So how you are tracking in terms of data, reporting that, and how you are making the intervention going forward, that whenever you make a decision, it's a more climate responsible decision in terms of investments.
Thank you for your question. It's always the difficult one that the people last get. But just to tell you that I think as a sponsor shareholder, you have to have courage to take difficult decisions. In 2020, the HBL group took a stated decision to not do any new coal financing. And that requires courage, because that means as the largest infrastructure lender in the country, with coal being the cheapest source of energy, you are basically telling all your customers that you will not be financing any coal project. We did that, and we have been doing that since 2020. And the existing, that we do have the coal in the portfolio, will be exited by 2030. So these are the kind of decisions that you take, and even with the ESRM, so we are the only ones in the country with a stated policy about this. And then when you look at the kind of sustainable lending that we're doing, so we're doing, there are both. There are environmentally linked facilities as well, and then there are socially linked facilities as well, because they both go in the ESRM. So if you're looking at the key performance indicators, there are things like inclusion, job creation, gender diversity. So we are compliant with all the, whether it's the IFC standards for the ESRM modules, and that's critical.
Thank you. Thank you. And Umar sir, one thing reminds me that you picked up that we never accounted for the cost of nature. There are two stakeholders sitting here, ACCIA, from ACCA, who was promoting integrated reporting way back, which actually account for the nature capital
So now
in
with
terms of the
S1
cost.
and S2 coming
It
in,
was
obviously
not adopted as
things
big
will
way,
change, yeah.
but definitely with the sustainability standards coming in, I think these are the things which
I think I'm really
which will
looking forward
help
to
them.
S1 and S2 being properly
Yeah,
adopted.
exactly,
across
that
the
will.
board.
Sorry, if I may add, because again, when you look at it, and yes, you've talked about scope 3, but then there's scope 1 and scope 2. And when you talk about reducing your own emissions as an organization, when you're a large purchaser, so for example, the HBL group, and then being part of the Khan Development Network, so the AKDN agencies, we have serious purchasing power.
Exactly.
And it was when we went to, like Dolan's and the other manufacturers of split air conditioners, to say we need the kind of air conditioners that will have that environmentally friendly coolant rather than the one which you are using. And even in the terms of the products and your customers, it's key.
Just building on what Maya is saying, I think I see a big shift. When we talk to younger consumers, the Gen Zs of this world, so there is a very strong business case for the commercial organizations
Exactly,
now.
definitely.
The younger generation, when they go out to buy stuff today, are more aware about sustainability and environment, and are making their choices keeping
More
this
conscious.
into consideration as well.
And I think the important point you pick up on the generation one, there is a $68 trillion which is in an intergenerational transfer right now, which will happen in the next 6, 7, 8 years. And they are the biggest consumer and the influencer and the investor at the same time.
Exactly.
And they are the most eco-conscious. So if the businesses do not align themselves with the climate and the sustainability priority,
Yeah.
so this is the amount which might exist with them today because of their previous generation. In the next generation, they are going to take it out. So be very, very careful how you really come and state your policy and act upon that. Another thing from a generation side, they do not believe in the conversation only. They want to see the action, data, analytics, assured information by the third party. They are born and raised in the era where there's a lot of fake news. So they need to really don't go with the opinions, they go with the data. So I want to pick a couple of questions from the hall before I start my next round of questions. Anybody, any question from the hall? Okay, so you prepare your question if, sorry, there's a, can we get a mic there? Be very precise, state your name, and then if you can address that, who you want to respond for that question, please.
Okay. Does it work? Hello. This is Sayyida Asma Indrabi, donor coordination consultant with the Prime Minister, AJNK. So I want to congratulate the organizers of this event who have gathered the great leaders over here. I just want to comment on a few things. It's not particularly a question, but just a comment since I'm working with the government of AJK, and we are working on the donor coordination and how we can make the sustainable development goals that we have targeted to achieve till 2030. I want to commend the current government who has given a great roadmap in the form of 5 E's. So the need of the hour is how we can integrate these 5 E's with all the development that's going on, be it the private sector, be it the development partners. The problem is that we've been working in silos, the reason that we stand here. today. So we need to build these collaboration. The organizer of this event needs great applaud because they have gathered the leaders here. That's what we need to do, to work in collaboration, not in the silos. Then I want to commend ACCA because since I've been a student of ACCA, the great contribution it has done in my life, the curriculum they design, the courses they design, they capacitate their student with what's going on in the world.
It's not
Yeah?
a planted question, I can tell you.
No, I'm telling you, it wasn't a question. I just wanted to comment, yeah. So I just want to share with all the audience the great contribution ACCA is making in Pakistan. They capacitate their student during the coursework with the global world. So, and then Helen was talking about the disclosure standards. She was talking about the sustainability audits. That's what you make a part of a system, and then it becomes unavoidable.
Yeah.
A student who's studying in a degree, and then, you know, the standards that are in the real world, they make it unavoidable. So that's sustainability. So when you talk about environment and you talk about our society, I think so livelihood is the basic importance.
Yep.
And environment stands at the last. So what we can do as a government, as the people of the state, what we can do is like how we can integrate in the curriculum. The entry point is the curriculum, be it the schools or the universities or any.
Thank you. I
Thank
think
you so
we have
much,
to
sir.
present-
Thank you,
But
thank
thank you very much for the great comment and the questions. There are certain suggestions. I think one suggestion I pick up that the silo thing. I think that's what we have seen a lot. And my experience working with the other countries and the other businesses as well, as soon as you start reporting, you start extracting that information, that data start coming up, it helps you to build the narrative and create that visibility, and that's where the silo, we start collaborating more to make sure that now the visibility is there. So data is the one of a key area which is important to break those silos and bring people together, provided they want to work on the same collective action or initiative. Second part, Ayla, if you want to comment on the ACCA initiative or anything you want to respond on that. Say thank you.
Yeah, first of all, of course, thank you for recognizing that. I think what we all are doing is the work that we should be doing because it is about responsibility. We are responsible for not ourselves, for the ecosystems that we create around the world, the countries that we operate in, the regions that we operate in. And when we talk about building capacity, we are talking about not just doing this for ourselves, but for the larger planet's benefit. And that has a positive impact, not just for the 8 billion population here, but many, many generations to come. So, of course, ACCA has been a pioneer in terms of not just building capacity for everybody else, but internally looking at its own operations as well, applying SBTI, science-based targets, measuring its own emissions. In the last 3 to 4 years, in terms of how ACCA functions, it has greatly changed, and we are absolutely cognizant as to what is the need in terms of what the youth of the world needs in terms of future ready to address and to provide for needs of various sectors and regions and in industries. So we continue to evolve and work with all partners and stakeholders around the world because we believe in stakeholder collaboration.
Thank you, Ayla. Thank you very much. Dr. Samuel, coming back to you, I think as a UNDP, you have got a lot of visibility in what's happening around the world as a UNDP, as an organization. And one of the feedback which keep getting from the climate fund investors, the people, even from a local financial institutions as well, that they are not getting the right kind of bankable project. Their investment gone in the projects, but they don't know the impact. The assessment is not quantified properly, or if it's quantified, it's not reliable. So I think a lot of questions from a climate and sustainability perspective, which led to a lot of greenwashing, fines and everything in Europe, that coming out from the data which we are using. And luckily, since 23 onward, there's a lot of standards and the frameworks which are available as a guidelines. So as a UNDP, number one, are you facing that problem, getting that data timely back to you, that what the project was and what the assessment? And number two, the data which you are getting, is it reliable enough that which can help you to make further decisions?
Thank you very much. So maybe I'll mention a couple of things that both relate to data, and I'll say something about coordination. You know, we affectionately refer to MOCC as MOCC, but we forget the other EC that actually exists, right? The EC is environmental coordination. And I think there's an interesting initiative that is happening as we speak between now and the end of June, where MOCC, led by the Secretary, and a number of donors, a number of ministries are coming together to develop specifically bankable projects that can go to a big and critical and important forum, Finance for Development Forum in Spain, late June. Could be the biggest finance and development opportunity this year, maybe for the next few years as well. Important also because we have 5 years to go for the Sustainable Development Goals. The numbers are not good, and the numbers are old. So some of the numbers that we all know by heart are actually quite old. This idea, for example, that Pakistan is on track to only achieve 35 out of 169 targets or indicators and Sustainable Development Goals is 2 years old. It takes almost 2 years or more to actually aggregate up numbers from the provinces, pull them together through the ministry, through planning, etc., and have an actual figure, etc. Another number that is now pretty old, it's at least 2 years old, comes from how much it would take the government of Pakistan to spend on Sustainable Development Goals so that it actually moves up in the organization. 16% of GDP, $52 billion, that's an old number. It must be more than that. So the challenge of data is that the world is moving much, much quicker than we're able to collect data and analyze it. Forget the collection and the analysis, it's only as good as a decision maker is able to do something about it. And this, I think, is where all of this pulls together into the reform agenda underway, economic reforms, the 5 E's, very catchy, an important part of the narrative, environment, empowerment, e-governance, education, etc., etc. It's really, really quite important. So the agenda for Pakistan over the next few years, I think, is critical and important. I'll just say 2 or 3 things that I think have now mainly turned from a nice talking point into a reality. One is what I've learned from the private sector here over the last 1.5 years since I've been here in Pakistan. I think the private sector in Pakistan has learned to do well and do good at the same time. So we're not talking about charity or CSR, we're talking about an alignment to Sustainable Development Goals as described by this panel, because sustainability is important, because inclusion is important, diversity is important. So that is one area. Secondly, we are still awaiting some big policy decisions and indications that I think will make a difference for climate change. State Bank is working on a green taxonomy. Why is that important? Because you can label everything greenwashing, you can label everything climate related, or you can actually identify particular areas that relate to water or energy or sanitation or even health and stunting or risk mitigation or risk insurance that I think make a difference. Otherwise, if you measure everything or you measure nothing, it won't really make a big difference. Thirdly, the discussion now around climate change, and I think this starts at least 2 or 3 years back, probably longer, is that we are no longer talking about climate change as something nice to have. A lot of the discussion now is about equity. It's about climate justice, it's about environmental justice, and I think this is the real narrative now that I think is really, really quite important because of the sense of inequity that actually exists. So aligning to SDG 13 is not the problem now. It's about 1 and 10, poverty and equity. It's about gender, it's about water and sanitation. And I'll tell you the third and last talking point, which I think is really quite important. Once an issue becomes a governance issue, like climate change becoming a governance issue, that I think is when it's taken more seriously. It's not a project, it's not an idea, it's not a pilot. It becomes something embedded in the structure and the planning of government. You have a plan and a policy and a law, and you have implementation, accountability follows. I believe if an issue is not in development, if an issue is not a governance priority or an issue, it's not going to be important. And I think for Pakistan, we have already moved in that direction where governance related to climate or the governance of climate, climate change, climate impact, etc., I think is really becoming at the heart of what needs to be done.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have any question from the audience before we start wrapping up the session? Here. Sorry, we will come back to you later.
Dr. Shagufta Jabir, CEO of Next Gen Impact Consulting. I work very closely with the university and college students on environment and some community-based initiatives. My question is directed to Dr. Samuel, because UNDP is very actively and purposefully involved in communities, rural and urban communities. How can young people from urban slums and rural towns be utilized or used for climate innovation, not only for climate awareness? Because we have to move towards innovation, and there's so many ways where we can involve more than 60% of the population. So what are your views on that? Thank you.
So if we can take another question and then we start replying to that. Can we get that question? Can we get Mike here?
My name is Ahmed Kamal, and I'm kind of representing the 60% of youth. We talk about gender inclusion all the time, but we kind of exclude the youth, for example, for most part. And having worked closely with different justices, Justice Mansoor recently said that access to climate finance is a basic human right now. So I wanted to know the thoughts of the panel on in this regard as well.
Access to climate finance.
Finance is a basic human
Thank
right
you.
now.
Dr. Samuel, innovation.
Okay, so that's a simple question to answer. We work with JS Bank, also an accredited entity related to GCF, over the past year and a half in a blended finance part. Very small money, I have to be honest. A little bit of money from them, 1/3 and 2/3 from us and 2/3 from JS Bank, for a competition to actually get young innovators to basically present to a panel ideas for climate aligned projects and programs, and they can use that money for anything they like. It wasn't very big money. It was maybe $60,000 or $70,000. 100+ applied, 4 entities won. I visited 2 of them in Karachi, and this I think relates to the youth part as well. 2 entities, both being run by very, very young people and very ahead of the game. One you might know is Velectra. Velectra electric motorcycle, super motorcycles, 3 types: $1,000 motorcycle for delivery purposes, $2,000 motorcycle for anybody that wants to actually, have a little bit of an enjoyment, and $3,000 if you want something that looks like a Harley. They build the entire motorcycle here minus the battery. And interestingly enough, they are a profitable company, by a young investor who, instead of spending time on Wall Street, decided to come here, and they're using the little money that we have given them with JS Bank for research and development. Another one that I actually visited is in a slum area, and this is important, and I don't remember the slum part of Karachi, but their operation is right across from the areas where they collect trash and sort it, etc. They turn single-use plastics, like wrappers for chips and everything else, into bricks through a very interesting process that they actually have been offering now to Shell and other big companies. Young people, profitable, very interesting. So I would say there's actually no shortage of innovation in this country, but I do believe that there may be a shortage of finance to actually make the difference between good and great. And I think a lot of this finance will most likely come from the internal sources. And I know that there are constraints on domestic banks who lend a lot to the government. Everybody knows that. But maybe with some stabilization measures and freeing up a little bit of the debt return or interest return, some of that freed up money can actually go to innovators, because I think that there is enough innovation and energy and enthusiasm to be able to get that done.
Thank you. So I think it's address your question, access to climate finance as well. There is a models and there are banks who are working. Anybody who wants to add that? Otherwise, our times is up. And okay. So thank you very much. I think great applause for our panelists. I think they have contributed a lot there. I think a couple of things if I wrap up everything. So number one, narrative building and stakeholder engagement. That's something which came out very strong. And if you have noticed that the people coming from the public sector, development sector, and the private sector, they are using a little bit different language. One is using SDG, other is using IFRS and ESRM. It's all linked though, but that's something where we have to create that capacity building, that what they are doing under the IFRS, which is a part of SDG, so as a consolidated, we can do that part. Another part which came out is the data. If we really want to attract the climate finance and the continuity of the project, the information is important and the reliable data and timely. We are seeing the city governments who are going with the quarterly reporting rather than the yearly or 2 yearly reporting. So they are going with the dashboards which are very, very live, and those are also attracting the FDI, and they are reporting their environment KPIs on that side. Other area is the collective action, not working in a silo, and again in the world which we have seen, if there's enough data and infographics available, so people start seeing that, believing that, and collaborating. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for being a great audience as well. So that's where we end this session. Thank you.
And thank you also, Sajid Aslam, for moderating the panel. Panel, if you would wait for just a moment, we are going to present you with the usual token of appreciation. I'd like to invite Farina and Rabia from Nutshell to join the panel and facilitate the presentation of the events. And the presentation itself will be made by Aisha Humaira Chowdhury, the Secretary of the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination. Thank you very much. Okay, this book for Sadia. Sadia Dada, Chief Distribution and Marcoms Officer at K Electric. Who's next? Is that Maya Inayat Ismail, who's the Chairperson Sustainability Forum at HPL and Chairperson at HPL Microfinance Bank. Samuel? Okay. Samuel or Umar? Umar Hassan Khan, the CEO of Dowlance. and Dr. Samuel Risk. He's the resident representative of Pakistan at the UNDP. Have you had yours? Sajid is staying on for And here's Sajid Aslam, the partner at Spectrico, who's actually going to stay with us for the next panel. And a quick group photograph, folks, if you would just line up for a second with your books. Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Let's move swiftly on. The issue of finance came up in that panel a couple of times. If you have paid any attention to what is happening in the global climate conversation, the developing countries pledged $100 billion a year for the global south to help them in the energy transition. That money never turned up. So what they did was at COP29, they decided they'd triple the promise and still not provide any of it. Let's talk a bit more about climate finance in some depth with our next panel. Michael Blank is the chairman of PRISM Carbon Solutions. Nadia Rehman, member of the Climate Change and Food Security Planning Commission of Pakistan. Nadia, are you with us? Nadia Rehman. Faisal Mohammed Al-Shumari is the head of ESG and corporate strategy at Mashrek. And Rizwan Atta, President and CEO of Bank Islami Pakistan Limited. Once again, your moderator for this session. Doing double duty today, Sajid Aslam.
Guys, if we can, I can request if you can take your seats, we can start the session. I think this is the one thing which we are talking since morning, that there are a lot of initiatives which we can take. There is a lot of effort which can go in, but at the end of the day, it requires certain financing, certain funding. Do we agree with that? Raise your hand if you feel that the climate interventions require funding. Only 2-3 people? Do we need climate finance? Great. Okay. So everybody who has raised the hand, they will get a certain chunk. The people who haven't raised the hand, they will not get anything. So be aware of that. So we will run a session and we will try to explore different areas. And I think one of the term which I would like first to start with, and that's the term which we talk a lot, but it's not very well understood. So starting with you, Michael, you are working on a carbon credit, right? And there's a certain understanding which exists that whatever we do, if I put my solar panel there, I am eligible for the carbon credit, and I can go and sell that one and make money out of it. If I have planted 10 trees, there should be a carbon credit and all that. So if you can help people understand in a layman language, what does it mean and how that criteria work and what is eligible for carbon credit and what is not. So if you can help the audience to understand, and then we can build that conversation further from a carbon credit side. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Michael Blank. I'm from Dubai, and I'm honored to be here on behalf of Nutshell, and I appreciate their hospitality and the invitation. I'm chairman of an ADGM company out of Abu Dhabi by the name of Prism Holdings, and we have our administrative offices in Ras Al Khaimah in the free zone in the UAE. With regard to carbon credits and with regard to the carbon marketplace, obviously it's a genre that we hear about all the time, and it's been quite confusing, and it's been a gray area for the last 20 years. Governments like Pakistan and other governments around the world have all committed to reducing carbon emissions with regard to Paris Accords and their ESG requirements. Pakistan has a 15%, they've committed to reduce their emissions by 15% by 2030. This, as you said aptly, is expensive. A lot of governments and a lot of companies and a lot of industries and sectors don't have a process for it. They don't have the capital reserve for it, but everyone is committed to it. What we have done is looked at the marketplace over the last 20 years and created a vertically integrated company called Prism Carbon Solutions. We're able to formalize this process at no cost to the government or no cost to the emitters, and we're able to process carbon credits through various different sectors like oil and gas, through reduction of emissions, and through forests. We're currently working in 12 countries around the world where we have mandates and contracts with not only governments but private industry and concessionaires, where we facilitate the process of certification, verification, validation. We have the most advanced digital registry in the world for transparency with NFTs on the blockchain, and we use a digital registry banking system for housing the carbon credits. So what we've tried to do is create a process that facilitates for not only government but private industry in an area that's been quite complicated and quite expensive. And then we have the capability of monetizing the carbon credits and bringing top-line revenue back to industry and back to governments so that they can create sustainability projects. So when you ask me about specific carbon credits, there are carbon credits that are available in approximately 24 different sectors. We concentrate on 2 sectors. That's oil and gas industry, which are the greatest emitters, and we also concentrate on forests, which are the greatest receivers of the carbon credits. So we're on the buy side, sell side, and we make the process quite simple for both government and private industry at no cost to them.
So, thank you, Michael. I think that if we go back to that, the key point is that there's a process, there's a data point, there's a validation, there's a blockchain involved, there's a transparencies. So all those points need to be there to just go and get your, whatever the effort you are doing right now for the reduction of carbon, that can become a carbon credit. So it's not just that you put something up and you can come next day and say there's a carbon credit side. We will explore that further. Nadi, coming to your side, and there's a a lot of conversation which is happening around, and it's happened in the morning as well, where people are talking about their projects, but they're not bankable. Like GCF it doesn't fulfill the criteria for GCF or GEF. And once you are coming from a planning commission perspective, which is supposed to be the heart of everything, where all the projects comes down and analyzed properly, and that's where the next data sets and the business cases which are being developed. So what's your view, the type of projects you are getting, and whether those are bankable in terms of the GCF, GEF, or any other climate fund which is out there to really support those projects? Sajid.
Thank you, Sajid. So the number that you're familiar with, Pakistan needs about 340 billion to become climate resilient by 230. We need about $200 billion to achieve our NDCs. So that's the size of the problem, that's the size of the challenge. And the government requires a coherent response and a systemic response. We need a coherence of policies, and then according to those policies, we have to bring in, align our programs and develop projects accordingly. And that would require mainstreaming of climate finance levers across the system, because climate finance is cross-cutting. You have decarbonization of the industry, the agriculture sector, then you have adaptation for disaster resilience and agriculture, so it's cross-cutting. We will need to introduce levers of climate finance across all policies. So that's an exercise that we are taking at the Planning Commission, and the government has to bring in climate finance or sustainable finance broadly into its financial planning. So the country is debt distressed. We need flows, carbon finance flows. My colleague Michael spoke about carbon finance. We need to factor in carbon finance, climate finance, and we need to look at disaster risk finance. And we also have to look at greening of our debt, which would include debt for climate swaps. Yes, debt to nature swaps. So we have to look at a host of instruments and factor them into the financial planning of the country. There are two reasons there are two imperatives for the government to do this. One is to reduce the overall cost of financing. We are an emerging market, a developing country. The cost of finance is very high. And concessional loans from climate finance and its climate-related associated loans would reduce the cost of financing for Pakistan. We are aware with the cuts in, everyone is aware that US aid has introduced cuts in spending, and we are going to see an overall decline in official development assistance from across all OECD countries. It's expected that it's going to come down by 25%. By 2027. So we will have to do a lot more with the funding that we have. So the question is not how much more climate finance we can bring into the country, but how can we target it better. So improving our public financial management practices and preparing, that brings me to your question of better projects, preparing better projects so that we are able to actually achieve climate outcomes. And with the lesser funding that we have, we should be able to crowd in private investment. And private investment only flows when the project is, as we say, investable, and it has the right returns. So we are now working, we've had a shift in our working with development partners. So multilateral development funding that is going to come into the country, it's going to, instead of that directly financing our projects, it's going to be used with grant and guarantee combination to reduce the cost of financing and de-risk private sector to bring in additional projects. So naturally, if this is going to have that MDB oversight, it's going to review the pipelines in a manner that we prepare and align our current pipeline and bring it and make it investable so that we are able to bring in the private sector. So we are going through that exercise as we speak, And we are also targeting the capital market. Pakistan is going to issue the inaugural green panda bond. It's going to be listed in the Shanghai Stock Exchange. For that, we are preparing a pipeline. And the process of, and we're working with Citi and Deutsche to select the projects and have the right transaction advisories in place. So this process has started in the government to align our portfolio and to reorient it towards the various instruments that are available. We have to remember that climate finance is not only funds. It's also all of these instruments, guarantees, de-risking instruments, panda bonds, debt swaps. So there's a host of instruments, and all of them require a different structure of a project.
No, definitely. Now, I'll come back to you with the one question, so we will continue this conversation. The question would be, who from a government side has a primary responsibility to raise that money? Because there's a MOCC, there's a finance ministry, there's a planning commission. So how that coordination is happening? Because there was a question in an earlier one, is it the work happening on the paper in the silo? Because it's a fantastic thing which you are talking about. Who is executing? What are the timelines? And which ministry is going to take the lead? So I'll come back to that questions later. So Faisal, coming from the Mashreq Bank, and I think that's a wonderful story. I tell most of the time how you move from a brick and mortar structure and how you move towards the total as a digital bank there. So as a head of ESG and a corporate strategy, and particularly if you talk from a Pakistan perspective as well as from a Middle East perspective, the selection of the project and the screening while you are making investment or you are extending loan or even you are taking a customer on board, now there's a lot of consideration which knowing your customer not only in terms of the identity, but you have to go through the activities they are engaged or involved in, which like Pakistan has also introduced that green taxonomy to identify those activities. So as a Mashreq Bank, how you are implementing those screening criteria to select the projects or the activity where you should raise money or you should invest money?
Thank you very much for hosting me today. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. One of the things that we need to highlight is when we talk about sustainable finance, it's not a banking issue anymore. It's an ecosystem that needs to kickstart and we need to accelerate it to achieve the climate ambition. If we talk about ESG risks and ESG risks subclasses, whether it's a project or a client or an obligor who needs money to achieve his energy transition, or it's a community who requires social financing. We need to have Ministry of Finance, we need to have the central banks sitting on a round table, which is already happening in UAE, but we need to see it in other countries also, discussing how to materialize and accelerate the climate ambition or ESG and sustainability in general. Saying so, we need to look at tax rebate. This is a very sensitive subject. Usually lots of countries are cautious when the private sector talks about tax rebate. Why? If I lose, I will stop funding. One bad scenario will cause private sector to back off from providing the highly required sustainable finance needed. And if the private sector will step back, government alone will not operate as a bank and they will never achieve their sustainability objectives, whether it's the 17 SDGs or the commitments made in Paris Convention or energy transition ambition. If we talk about energy transition finance, and my colleague here mentioned that there is 200 billion required. I believe the numbers are changing by the second. Why? First, urbanization is not stopping. It's evolving by the minute. Two, when we look at disrupting and emerging technology such as AI and cryptocurrency, fintech in general, etc., they are adding challenges. They have their own positive side, of course, but they are adding the challenges. Why? If we look at AI energy demand globally, specifically with the big companies today, if we look at Google, Meta, and others, Microsoft included, they are talking about creating their own nuclear reactors to meet their energy ambition. And if we look at countries like us in the UAE or Pakistan, we have 4 nuclear civilian reactors in UAE. But are they going to meet our demand? The current estimation, they will meet 40%, 30% of the consumption by 2030. But with the exponential growth in demand when it comes to cooling for AI, and when we talk about vertical farming to address our food security issues, that's another challenge. In the UAE, for example, 60% of the consumption of energy in summer is for cooling purposes. Yep. And we are not talking about AI, and we are not talking about vertical farming yet. In winter, that's an excess energy that we can export easily. This is an opportunity for private sector, government sector, to talk about creating a huge grid, a global grid, where and energy, transmission. Yeah, it could be a marine cable, where we can exchange this energy in winter to Pakistan and India and the region. Why? It will be affordable by us to export, and it's highly needed in winter for heating purposes and for industry. True. We need to think out of the box, and we need to bring realities and numbers. Investing and reinventing the wheel in infrastructure will never make sense when it comes to generating the highly needed energy.
No, great. So climate finance, we are talking about the ecosystem where all the value chain, partner, public-private partnership, reporting data, that information flow freely and timely, so people can make decision and they can take it forward from there. The one thing which we struggle in COP as well, and also whenever we start talking about the climate finance, getting a very specific answer is a very, very difficult thing, and that's evolving field, and that's totally understandable. It's an unknown area, it's evolving, we are going to get there, but I think which Nadia picked up, that it's not a one financial instrument, there are multiple financial instruments, and we have to start again talking about the capacity building, that how the projects should be developed, the business case should be developed, but for which specific financial instrument, and how the ecosystem is going to support that entire financial instrument, because it's not going to be the conventional way somebody sending a money and somebody repaying it back. It has to be certain KPI driven, then it's become a climate finance, and it has to be very visible that what's happening with that money. Even for the carbon credit, now it's required what the proceed you are getting back, where you are deploying that one. If you are deploying that again in a mission activity or something which emit the carbon again, so you will start losing the value of that one or resale of that project. Coming to you, Atta, there is a lot of conversation happening right now, and we are seeing Sharia compliant, ESG aligned. That term is also coming up now as a one of an index as well. It's also coming up as a financial instruments as well, where they have started talking about Sharia compliant instruments as well as which are aligned with the ESG. And in one of my previous conversation, there's a consensus that ESG and Sharia compliance is very, very close. It's ethical, it has to doing the right thing for the right reason, whether we talk environment, social or governance. So those are key principles which exist in Sharia as well as in the ESG side. So how you in a Bank Islami are looking to become an intermediary for climate finance or creating your own product and fund those kind of products. So what kind of projects you are looking at and what kind of products you are looking at, how the Bank Islami is going to play their role in climate finance domain.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazakallah khair for asking. I think it's not only the Bank Islami, I think it's the countrywide need and worldwide need, obviously. So I'll break it into 2-3 parts. First, there is a great example of Indonesia and Malaysia where they have come up with these skooks, Sharia compliant skook, and one worth of about $2 billion, $3 billion. We still have to do a lot more. Just one example in Pakistan of WAPDA, and that's a very small amount. I'll break it into 3 things. First is the first skook initiative about this should be through the government, and that has to be SLR compliant which means it's a regulatory requirement for the banks to place certain amount of their liabilities deposit in the government. So that is about, if we have about 35, 36 trillion worth of rupees deposits as an industry, and about more than 15% has to be kept with them. So that huge amount which is readily available or can be readily available to put into Sharia compliant schools. And then the entire Islamic banking is going to be converted to Sharia compliant by 31st December 2027. So I think that huge funds will be available and still are available that can be deployed in Sharia compliant scope. And number two, I think I must say that you rightly said that Sharia compliant and ESG go hand to hand. It's the same. Islamic banking, Sharia compliant banking is ethical banking. So it's all about doing ethical things, and the corporate, large corporate in Pakistan, and especially the exporters, they have to compete many countries and to comply with the international regulations for green energy and other certification. So the private sector should be coming up asking for funds from the banks, financial institution, and investor through stock exchange to come up with the green schools and requirement for ESG requirements. Third one, which is very suitable for our type of economies, is PPP, public-private partnership. That hybrid model is worth doing for our economies like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, where governments are normally slow and the public sector is faster. So I think that model can be very useful to generate quick funds and to invest in all this green initiative, solar, wind, hydro, that can work for Pakistan. I think the amount of money that our colleague is talking about, $100 billion or more, that can be done, but our economy size is not that big. And we are not still ready as a nation to do it. But I think first step has been already taken. And I think with the government, public-private partnership, and initiative by the large corporate, this is possible to create an environment which should encourage the green energy scope.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Michael, you raised one thing, and I think that's the audience would like to understand it better. You said that you can help channelize the carbon credit and the carbon finance with no cost to government or a private sector. So if you can elaborate that a little bit, what do you need from government or a private sector to work on that framework where they can get access to that kind of carbon credit or a finance against the carbon credit, please?
As we discussed on the panel, there's a $200 billion figure that Pakistan is looking at in terms of becoming ESG compliant and committing their 15% carbon emission reduction. We have a methodology that we've been using right now in 12 different countries where we create our formula where we go to the government, and the governments, as in Pakistan's case, does not have the reserve capital. Many of the countries that we deal with don't have hard currency, and the hard currency is a commodity. So we go to the government and we say to them, we will self-fund as PRISM the entire project. The only thing we need from you is latitude and longitude, in this case using the example of forests. And then we will do a feasibility study at our cost, an economic analysis at our cost of the monetization of the ultimate carbon credits, and then a time frame of when they will be monetized. In addition to that, we can create green bonds, and in addition to that, we have a methodology of selling our carbon credits, and we're the only company in the world that does this in bulk. And as you know, carbon credits are annually renewable. So this is a real windfall for the government, because we sell to airlines, chemical companies, oil and gas industry, mining companies, the largest emitters in the world, even states and cities. But what's more important, we have a methodology of creating what I call a carbon reserve, which is maintaining the digital assets in a digital bank and then borrowing against them for the benefit of sustainability projects within country. So there's a lot of different opportunities here. We are totally Sharia compliant. So we really do it on a bespoke basis, based on government needs, based on private industry needs. We can formulate on a bespoke basis whatever financial document or financial formula is necessary. My background is law and banking, so we're able to bring that to the forefront to help the clients.
I think that's a very good and ideal example of how the financial instrument look like, where you are using a certain right and converting that right into a financial flow. So I think these are the things where Pakistan or as a ministry, we might have to go more in R&D and look what kind of other financial instrument exist out there which we can replicate for Pakistan, what we can localize for Pakistan. I'm sure we cannot replicate everything. Like Amazon, the one which have raised 1.5 billion very recently for and they are using a non-timber revenue to repay that loan. If you look at the financial instrument, there are 20 different parties, there are different kind of guarantees. So this is not a very straightforward financial instrument. So there has to be a proper research and the structure there. So Nadia, a final question for the panelists. Who in Pakistan is responsible to raise that money to fund the NDC, which is $348 billion as per the last number? It might change going forward. So who has a primary responsibility to raise that money in the next 5 years?
So we talked about how climate finance is made up of different instruments and different funds. For UNFCCC funds, which include the Green Climate Fund, it is the Ministry of Climate Change. So Ministry of Climate Change is the national designated authority for the UNFCCC. So GCF, GEF, and Adaptation Fund, it's a Ministry of Climate. For authorized credits under the carbon markets, it's a Ministry of Climate Change. For public-private partnership, it's a Public-Private Partnership Authorities and the Planning Commission. It's a subsidiary body of the Ministry of Planning. And for blended finance, it's a planning commission because we approve the debt finance that goes into public infrastructure and public projects. So for blended finance to work with MDBs, it's going to be the Ministry of Planning and Economic Affairs divisions so that we negotiate our loans accordingly. Ministry of Finance for sovereign bonds.
Okay.
So, Ministry of Finance takes its projects from the Planning Commission. So the asset register comes from us. It's a combination. So it's an ecosystem, and there are very clear rules of business as to who is responsible for what. There is no one primary, because climate finance, if you unbundle it, it's more, we unbundled it in the climate finance strategy, it's more than 25 different activities. We talked about the green taxonomy that's being done by
the reporting, the law, the policies.
That's by SECP is doing the reporting for the firms. Green taxonomy is being built by the state bank, and that's for greening the private sector. And then corporate green bonds can be issued also. So climate finance is a host of activities, and all of those would have to be operationalized for us to meet the challenge that we are faced with. And it's in our interest to do it for adaptation and mitigation. Second, to do it for reducing overall cost of borrowing for the country, reducing our debt. And third, for economic transformation towards greener solutions, which we need to remain relevant in international value chains and to bring in innovation and to keep green jobs. So that the role of the private sector and enabling that is very relevant in unlocking the climate finance.
No, thank you very much. I think it's an important piece of information, something like which we were talking about the silo. There's a structure to that one, that how the responsibility is divided between the different ministries or department. And like Faisal highlighted earlier, it's not the matter of a one thing or other, it's a matter of an ecosystem. So that ecosystem needs to work there. So just if you have any question, we have got one opportunity to take one or two questions, and then we will wrap it up. Any question from the audience? Yeah, please, you add meanwhile. Anybody who has a question, raise the hand and you will get the... Okay, there's a question. Please, you go ahead, and we will.
When we talk about ESG taxonomy, it is something that we need in the private sector and in the banking.
Yeah.
If the government doesn't tell us what's highly prioritized to them, it will be difficult for us to discuss subsidies and tax rebate. And until today, ESG is usually E only. It doesn't look at the poor farmer who need a diesel generator or a solar panel to pump water into his dry field. When we look at social financing and specifically microfinancing for such projects to help them adapt into climate change, they will struggle and the plants and the trees will die. And this is something we need to address because it not only covers food security, but it also will add the nature-based carbon credit, trees, afforestation activities, etc. And today we need to sit in a round table, create, let's say, what we call ESG and Sustainable Finance Pakistan Accelerator, where government sector and private sector will sit together and exchange ideas. We will share our concerns and worries about losing or the investors' challenges, and the government will tell us what are the key prioritized projects. And by exchanging this open dialogue, we will have a high accelerated maturity level coming and happening in months. When we talk about food nexus, for example, it covers water management, energy, and food factories. Agriculture is no more a field. It's a food factory. And food nexus is the title for the future. With the growing population of Pakistan and becoming a hub for food security for GCC and other places like Europe, etc., food nexus is the way forward.
No, definitely. And Faisal, you picked up the right thing. It's given, again, you picked up the ecosystem, and Nadia picked up how it's divided, and also Michael picked up that how he has shared the one example of how the entire financial flow works there, and Atta also shared that how the Sukuk and the green banking and the Sharia compliant thing we can bring. And I think the important point is that today, like we are sitting here and we are talking about that, we understand it's a complex field, right? It's complex because we haven't made an effort to make it known. So it's unknown right now. We have to sit together and make it more known. We have to go through the simplification process, and the world has done that. We can create 5, 10, 15 different financial instruments which are fit for purpose and address the ecosystem, and not only the E but the S and G as well, to make sure that whatever is happening in terms of the social side, that's also addressed, because environment challenge or vulnerability raised to the next thing, which is involuntary migrations, which create a health crisis, which create a housing crisis going forward. So I think these are the areas which are important to create that kind of, and that's as for you, to create a smaller group where people can sit together and talking about the SDGs and the NDC from a public sector and development sector, and taking it to the private sector in the ESG and green taxonomy and the financial instrument. That could be one of our opportunities. We have one question there. You have to be very specific and quick.
So I hope I don't have to introduce myself.
No,
again.
you have to.
Do I have to? Okay. So this is Sayyida Asma Indrabi. I'm donor coordination consultant with the Prime Minister, AJNK, and we are steering the SDG unit also. So this session on the future of climate finance, why are we only looking at the bigger picture of the climate finance of the big dollars and the big rupees? We are actually not investing in the social behavior change. You see, the entry point is, since we have a faith-based economy, yeah? So that's an entry point where you can actually raise the climate finance from the household level. And you don't have to look up to the other people to provide you the finance for the climate change. So they're the smaller changes that you can do from the ground level, utilizing the youth, utilizing the academia, and utilizing the religious leaders for this social behavior change. And Madam, since the ministry has come up with a great framework, I really like it, the roadmap of the 5 E's. So let's see how we can integrate the social behavior change for all the SDGs. And for the sustainability, the SDG units that the UNDP along with the MOPDSI has established. we need to sustain those institutions
Now,
for the sustainability.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think in a morning, specifically, Madam Aisha Secretary, she raised that one as one of her key interventions, the change in the social behaviors. So that's one of our intervention which MOCC has already came up as a part of their policy intervention, other than the capacity building and all that. So there are certain areas which are being discussed in the morning as well. Sorry. Any other, please. I have the sign times up, so be very specific and quick. And also address that, who you are addressing the question to, right?
Thank you very much. This is Imranul Haq. Actually, I would lead from the what Honorable Minister, Mr. Musqaddam Malik was talking about. Actually, Pakistan is one of the victims of the climate change, which is not very indigenous. So how this taxonomy thing will address the issue which Pakistan is facing right now? Mr. Atta maybe would be the appropriate person to answer the question, please.
I think she's expert in taxonomy. She'll be able to really. You talked about taxonomy. Yeah.
So the taxonomy identifies which processes and are eligible for green finance. So whether they are for adaptation or mitigation. So if it's for adaptation, it would help us expand green financing towards activities that require that kind of funding. So it's basically an instrument which helps you expand credit in a certain direction. To answer your question, the taxonomy directly is the money has to be raised and then directed through those into those activities. Those activities for adaptation have to be defined.
May I elaborate on something?
Yeah, please.
If we look at the UAE experience in COP28, 5 banks managed to commit to invest 1,000 billion dirhams by 2030 on sustainable finance. The money is there, but the taxonomy is critical to create the bilateral relationship between financial institutions and the banks. If we lose money, we will stop funding. The governments need to step forward and to acknowledge and enable us. If we lose a prioritized project that reflects the needed money in a prioritized project, then tax rebate and other incentives are eligible. In addition, when we talk about the taxonomy, we should make sure that we don't fall into the same mistake as the European Union, focusing on the green only, neglecting the social.
End. No, thank you. So I think that's answered your question. Taxonomy is a categorization. The type of money is a separate decision, whether it's a grant, it's a debt, or it's equity, so that could be a different one. But the categorization of activity is important to identify that it's being invested in a right activity or not.
So, add very briefly,
we totally
building on Faisal's point, the government is making the green taxonomy, and we have also developed a sustainable finance framework, which includes the S component. So that is for the bond market right now. Thank you.
No, it's quite a comprehensive green taxonomy if you look at that, what is coming up, and the framework for the climate finance. So if we put together, that's working out very fine. Guys, thank you very much. A big round of applause for our panelists. And thank you for being such a patient audience. Thank you very much.
And thank you to Sajid. Interesting panel, folks. Thanks again to Sajid for doing double duty with 2 panels today. Please stay on the stage for one moment, please, while we present you with a couple of gifts. Let me invite Farina Mazhar from Nutshell and also Major General Shahzad Naeem Khan from Nutshell to come and assist with the process. And to hand out the gifts, Dr. Sadia Nadeem of Deem Far School of Management. Also, please join us on the stage for the quick photo session and thank you ceremony. Who will be taking the first? Okay, let's give the first ceremony to Nadia Rahman, a member of the Climate Change and Food Security, the Planning Commission of Pakistan. Fantastic. Round of applause also for Michael Blank, the chairman of Prism Carbon Solutions. And the next recipient, Faisal Mohammed Al-Shimari, head of ESG and corporate strategy at Mashrek. And also for Rizwan Atta, President and CEO of Bank Islami Pakistan. Does Sajid get a second book, or is it? Sajid Aslam, partner of Spectrico. Thank you once again to our panel. Fantastic. Our last session of the day, ladies and gentlemen, last but certainly not least, and one that I think might be particularly fascinating, is called A Conversation on Changing Narratives. Our panelists are Sharon Ezeldin, founder of Honor UK, and Mahmoud Ashraf Hatem, partner at Synergies Middle East and Africa. The conversation will be moderated by Rita Kazi, advisor on special initiatives and investment in the Senate of Pakistan. Folks, please join us on the stage if you can make your way through the crowd. Changing narratives. Over to you. Folks, if you would step away from the stage, please, that would be fantastic so that we can begin the next panel.
Mine doesn't.
Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. Because my mic is on this side, so. Okay, hello. Hi, so good of so many of you to stay for our session. So good of you so many to come and join us for our bedtime story session. I am so pleased and so delighted to be welcoming two global experts with me today here on this session called Changing Narratives. I have with me Ms. Sharon Ezeldin. She is the founder of Honor UK, which is a communications firm that specializes in media relations as well as reputation management expertise. Sharon, I can't even begin to imagine the kind of work that you have to do to manage the reputations of people in the public and private sector these days in such challenging times. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do? But before we go there, I'm just going to take one small minute with your permission and introduce here this gentleman who's standing between me and your conversation, Mr. Mahmood Hatim. You are a founding partner of Synergies, which is a strategic studies think tank and government relations consultancy based out of Cairo, and you are working across the MENA region. We're very pleased to have you here with us, and hopefully we'll have a very engaging session today. So Sharon, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you do and what you do?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a real pleasure to be in Pakistan for the first time. I own a strategic communications consultancy based out of the UK that represents and supports clients across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. A majority of our work focuses on supporting CEOs, C-suite executives, sovereign entities, and working with Web3 consultancy projects. So my work really involves supporting reputation management, strategic planning, crisis communications, and really stakeholder engagement through private and public sector businesses.
That's great. So our topic here is about storytelling. And since time immemorial, storytellers have had this wonderful job of getting people together in a room, or whether it's around a campfire or whether it's around cocktails, they have a way of communicating tales of heroism, tales of tragedy, tales of love, and they collect people and make people listen. So storytelling is a big part of what the oldest profession in the world has been and what your profession currently is. Do you think, in your opinion, has storytelling played a major role in convincing leadership to take certain decisions which are not always very pleasant, but you know are crucial for them to take because you need to get them to a place where you would like to see them succeed? What, in your opinion, is the role of storytelling then?
I believe storytelling is absolutely crucial, whether it's through private sector or public sector businesses. Storytelling is the cracks and, the cracks and bolts of communication effectively. So if you are able to communicate a convincing story, a persuasive story, that's basically how you're able to change perceptions and garner interest from audiences. And that's basically what people do, yeah.
And I think, Mahmood, your job, in my opinion, from what I've been studying all morning, is that this particular art of the craft of storytelling is what then you use to affect public policy change. That's your job. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you do that over in Cairo, and what is it that you can do for us here, or what Pakistan needs in this spectrum?
Thank you very much, Rida. First of all, I'm very happy to be here in Islamabad, second time for me in Pakistan. I would like to thank my older brother, His Excellency Asfar, the Nutshell team, Osman, Rabia, everyone, for organizing such a beautiful event. Before talking about changing narrative, I want first to talk about the power of narrative. Because of my visit last year here in Pakistan, in Karachi, I came this time with two other ambassadors to speak about this beautiful country, Sharon Izzuddin and Ihab. And now there are like more ambassadors to speak about this beautiful country and the amount of business opportunities that you can find here. So usually the investors, they don't look only on numbers. They want to hear a story. They want to relate. So having a proper story, this is something very important. And since I've been working in lobbying, advocacy, and public policy, how we regulate and we do regulatory frameworks and legal frameworks, and we put on the table the public sector and the private sector together. This is how we make like a proper ecosystem to make the country attractive for investors. And this should be done through changing the narrative. And this is what usually strategic communications does and PR agencies does, like Sharon, usually help in that.
Right, so what I'm understanding is that these things work in tandem. You can't have a compelling story without a strategy to deliver on the promise of that story. And you can't do one without the other. I think the gap here that we are seeing in the public and private synergy is the lack of a compelling story from the public sector that the private sector wants to act on. What has been your experience in working on those synergies between the public and private sector? I know that you've done work on some track to diplomacy, you've done work on government relations. What is then your view on what is the best idea about getting the two parties on that table and getting what you need from them?
Well, this is a very good question. So basically, what we do at Synergies is what we call it the second track diplomacy, or the unofficial diplomacy. So when there is like a bilateral relation between two countries, we help and we cooperate with the trade and commercial diplomacy in the embassies, and we help the trade and investment. And we've been like advising a lot of private sectors in the healthcare sector, pharma, tech, AI, cybersecurity. And while doing the market access, it's different whether I'm gonna do the advisory or like the advocacy in North Africa or in Sub-Saharan Africa or in GCC. Each part of the world, there is like a story for it, there is an entrance, and there are like behind the scene players where we need to target it well and formulate like a proper advocacy plan and a proper strategy to get the best result for our client at the end of the day.
Of course, it's always customized. It's
Exactly.
always, you go in with a particular lens, you understand what that country, that culture is all about, and you tailor a strategy that is specific to that region.
Exactly.
And Sharon, in your opinion, what is the most important strategy toolkit that you have in your belt that you know is going to, I know we've talked about storytelling, we've talked about your focus on people and your messengers, quote unquote. What is the most important strategy toolkit tool that you have in your strategy toolkit?
I believe it's obviously building the communication strategy, building the narrative, identifying the key spokespeople, media training them, making sure that they're well equipped to be able to handle difficult questions, and putting them on a global stage. Also, reputation management, so preparing them for crisis. And I think, there are various different tools that you use when you're building a campaign or when you're building communication strategy, and you just got to know when to deploy certain tools out of the toolbox.
Of course. Yeah. And you mentioned spokespeople. Now, the risk that public sector runs with having spokespeople is that they automatically become the targets for, in this day and age, for trolling, for criticism, for anything that is going to be going towards the government goes automatically towards those spokespeople. But alternatively, you have said that there is an opportunity in that, because those spokespeople are people who are going to be really relaying the public sector's message out to the external world. Now, in this day and age, when there is AI being deployed to damage people's reputations, what do you do to manage that? What do you do to counter that?
I think at the moment there's been a massive shift in the next 2 years around building the personal brand of a CEO or, for example, of a government entity, to managing, the deep fake and countering the difficulties that we're going to be facing, say, in the next 24 months in that area. So I think PRs and strategic communication professionals are now, in the UK specifically and in the Western society, are spending a lot of time preparing, contingency plans around how do we ensure that there is protection for messaging, making sure that content is authentic, you know, and kind of really combating that challenge that we're going to be seeing in the next 24 months. So there's definitely a shift from building profile to protecting profile.
Of course, that's a very important aspect of managing communications in this environment. I know that for firsthand because I have served as the spokesperson for one of the nation's largest public sector organizations. Public sector these organizations are in the business of providing services. And wherever you're providing services to 250 million people, there is going to be a risk of, you know, doing something wrong. Anything that ever went wrong was always the spokesperson's fault. It was never the organization that was doing it. There was never the, you know, sort of endemic problems that exist with this institution or with the services, but it was always something that we had to manage. So I completely understand that we're in a place and age where it's more about protecting versus really promoting. If we could get our heads wrapped around that, around your particular skill set, I think we'd be at an amazing place. You have talked about, Mahmoud, you've talked about your ability to convene different kinds of tables. You've talked about your ability to do track 2 diplomacy. You've talked to me about your public-private partnerships. What is the one piece of advice that you keep finding yourself recurringly giving to clients on both sides? What is the one thing that you bring up often in your own personal narrative when you're talking to clients? What is that?
So basically, I advise my clients to listen to locals, because at the end of the day, it's the local who's acquainted by the landscape and understand the culture. It's very important while going to a country to understand the pace of the people and what works and what doesn't work. So, for example, if you're going and you're doing business in Kenya or Nigeria, there is a way to do business other than the way that you're going to do it in Riyadh or in Doha. So you have to respect the culture and do it like locals usually maneuver things.
Right. And I know that this morning we were speaking, there was a panel, and one of the things that we drew from that was that there is a combination of facts and then there is an ambition that the country or the local clientele has for itself. You have now been to Pakistan twice. You are a big ambassador for the country. We're very grateful to you for that, and we're very grateful to you for having brought so many friends here with you this trip, and we hope that you'll keep coming back. What do you think has been our ambition? What is Pakistan's ambition? What is the potential that you see here? Or in your opinion, what should it be? My question to you is in the context of me advising senior leadership in the country on what we need to be doing, what investments we need to be bringing in. So this is the reason I'm posing this question particularly to you, because you have talked to me about the combination of facts and ambition.
Well, a great nation like Pakistan having 250 million people and with a big base of youth, this is something that it's very rare to other countries, maybe in Europe. So the capacity building and the vocational training is something that the government should work on with big multinationals to offer jobs to the young generation. And having like investment summits like these, like Nutshell is doing today and is hosting us, it's very important to bring like international speakers from across the world and show the amount of business and the amount of opportunities in this amazing country. I mean, it's still not shown to the world the capabilities of the people in Pakistan and how it's a great nation that is connecting Asia to the Middle East, to the GCC. I think that in the next couple of years, this great country will play a pivotal role in being like a communicator or like bridging the gaps.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think this is borrowing off of the lunch conversation that we all were having, where Sharon nicely mentioned. Sharon, what was that phrase that you said about Pakistan being what state was it?
Connector state.
A connector state.
Yeah.
We've heard so much about, over the years, about the geostrategic significance of where Pakistan is located, what all we bring to the table. I was telling you about the Mines and Minerals Conference just that we just had a few days ago, I believe. Time stops moving in the city.
Great opportunity.
But that was a great opportunity. But you mentioned something about visibility, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that just as we come to the close of this. What is it particularly that we're doing wrong in terms of visibility? Because there is something that's going wrong, because we put on a fantastic show. It was demonstrating all the great potential that we have here, but you didn't hear about it in the UK, did you? And I think Mahmoud didn't hear about it in Egypt. So what is it about visibility that we can do?
I think at the moment, with the way the world is changing, the geopolitical shifts, the disruption in technology, the issues with trade, the disruption with trade, for example, I see an opportunity for a country like Pakistan to really try to position itself not only as a connector state, but to kind of use opportunities to communicate the strategic advantage that they bring through being a connector state. So, for example, the population, the youth, the various sectors that they're strong in, technology, sustainability, are key areas that they should be, obviously communicating on the global stage. I also think that there's a lot of visibility that needs to be done, not around landmarks or heritage, but around creating authentic storytelling around people. So creating stories around, the innovative gentleman in Karachi who's leading the way in a specific area of technology that the world doesn't know about. So how do you position Pakistan to the UK? You need to create stories about the locals, and you need to be more proactive, and you need to kind of have ambassadors, not across just government, but kind of create a narrative council where you have government, private sector, entrepreneurs, all singing off the same sort of singing sheet, and really just kind of communicating and getting that message out on the global stage, and actually taking risk. I think that's another area that Pakistan would definitely benefit from. We had a very similar situation in Egypt, a country that I worked with in terms of building communication strategy for the Arab Republic of Egypt. And we had a lot of communication challenges in the West, how Egypt was perceived globally, human rights issues, obviously issues with economic reform, for example. So the key is to really kind of find somebody within the government or within, in the public eye that can really communicate and take the risk and basically start building that story. And all it takes is one person to start and garnering that kind of support, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely, 100% agreed. Although I have a slight difference of opinion with you on just us not hiding behind our heritage. Our great heritage is linked to a lot of great food, so we are going to absolutely always find an opportunity to showcase that. But beyond that, I absolutely agree with you that we need to be telling better and more authentic stories about who we are as a nation, as a country now, and I think that's what the changing narrative is going to look like, that the story is going to change from just being strategically located in a particular part of the world to actually who we are as 150 million youth. What can they bring to the table? What can they bring to the global stage? I think that's what's changing about our particular narrative. We're very, very delighted that you could be a part of this ongoing discussion, this conversation around it. We hope that you're going to keep coming back to it and back to Pakistan, hopefully with lots of, I'm looking at you, Mahmoud, bringing lots of investment for us and making sure that, we're all set for success, all set for victory. Success, in terms of how we used to envision it when we were growing up. success was very precise. Many people who are my age group in this room and older will understand and resonate with this. Success was always was easily quantifiable. You get the grades, you get the numbers, you get into a good medical school, you get into a good engineering school, you get the degree, and there you are, you're set for success. But how do you do that? How do I explain that model of success where it's not precise anymore? That model of success is not precise. How do I explain that to my 10-year-old who's saying to me, the only precision I know is that I have to get that ball through that goalpost and that's it. Beyond that, everything is disrupted and everything, all traditional models of success are disruptive. So I'm very pleased that, we were able to have this discussion around new models of success and new models of telling stories. And hopefully we'll keep seeing more of you. And thank you very much to Nutshell and to our good friend and my older brother, Asfar, for putting this together so that there is an opportunity to tell these stories which are very much needed. We have maybe perhaps 2 minutes or so to take, do we have 2 minutes or so to take, we have a bit to take questions, about 3 minutes.
Reda, before just going for the Q&As, I have two things I would like to mention. That big consultancy firms like Nutshell, they have a big role in adopting going from reactive to proactive narratives, helping the government instead of going from a defensive, explaining challenges to project vision, to go on the offensive side and help them how to do this. And doing successful conferences like Leaders in Islamabad or the one in Karachi, definitely is doing its role and is helping big time getting foreign direct investment to our beautiful country, Pakistan. And also what we discussed before lunch, when we were really hungry, remember that? About
I'm always really hungry, so you'll have to be more specific.
We talked about the soft power, how we can use actors, people, musicians, and people in the art industry, how to position Pakistan on the global scene and to put it more on the radars through soft power across different part of the world. So we shouldn't forget the soft power.
And I wouldn't admit this otherwise, but my whole concept of framing this as a storytelling session came from that conversation. So whether it's the directors or the performers or the writers, it is the story, the craft that we're trying to promote here is the storytelling. So we will certainly take your advice on that, certainly take some ambassadors from Karachi, your favorite, it's been your favorite so far, but I'm going to find you some people in Lahore that you can get behind as well. So thank you so much. We are going to take a question now if there is one. We've got a minute. You can tell a story if there is no question. You can tell a story. I love stories. All right.
Hello. Oh, wow, okay. I don't quite have a story to tell, but I did have a question for Sharon.
Sure.
Sharon, you say that storytelling is key to sort of changing perceptions.
Yes.
Could you give us an example from your, I'm sure, all the engagements that you've done in Egypt or in any other part of the world where you came across a particular narrative or a particular context, and then you said, well, this is what I think you should really do to sort of change perceptions and narratives. Anything interesting that pops into your mind? Could you give us an example to really bring alive the concept?
Yeah, sure. So I think with Egypt specifically, when I first started working with the government, there was a lot of issues around human rights in the UK press. So Egypt was facing a lot of backlash around its human rights record. So the key thing here with Egypt is that the Egyptian government was doing a lot of work behind the scenes with United Nations, developing their human rights record, building their reporting, and really kind of trying to get that out on the global stage. So understanding exactly what they were doing behind the scenes and working with the various ministries and the different spokespeople in Egypt, that's how we started to articulate step by step exactly what Egypt's position is is on human rights. And we started to document the reports. We started to really showcase the world. We started to put some of the key spokespeople on very senior level programs like Newsnight and Panorama and Channel 4 News in the UK. So this is where things started to sort of change, because there was clarification rather than, for example, there being a perception of Egypt having difficult human rights record. We actually had people from governments starting to set the record straight on exactly on what Egypt's human rights record was. So we weren't shying away from addressing the questions and letting the media basically run with whatever narrative they wanted to run. We were tackling it face on, and then we're starting to build communications and shifting perceptions around other topics, for example, other topics that Egypt wanted to focus on. So, for example, we were coming up to COP27. Obviously, climate change was a huge area for Egypt. So, you know, we were creating strategy and kind of building different sort of building blocks around what we wanted to communicate globally about the Egyptian government and a lot of the different sort of work that they were doing, you know, whether it was economic outlook, climate change, development, you know, how we work with the development community, various different topics, for example.
Thank you. That was nice and clear and very encouraging, actually, for somebody in the public sector to still think, because we are so used to being reactive all the time. All our policies are reactive. Our defense mechanism kicks up. We have a former airman amongst us. He knows we're always on the defensive, right? And the clear thing, I think the clear message, because I think we are the last, are we the last session today? We are, okay. I'm standing between you and coffee and probably namazes and everything. No, so just my final thought, I think today on it is that navigating the unknown is not a challenge here. Things are always going to be uncertain. I'm sure you'll agree with me on this. I think it is about having this clarity, this certainty that we can go beyond the unknown and having the courage to do it, and then finally following through with some credible action. I think that's where we're headed. And thank you to my superb experts and my Pakistan ambassadors now for joining me today.
Can I just add, sorry?
Of course, add away.
You know, Egypt is a country that's built on crisis, and, you know, there's a lot of sort of similarities with Pakistan and Egypt in the sense that, you know, countries that are built on crisis have a very authentic school of diplomacy. And, you know, governments like Egypt, you know, they are not afraid to get out there and communicate and say what they need to say on a global stage. And I think shying away and not taking risks will just obviously affect your investment opportunity, will invest your foreign, you know, how you're seen globally around the world. And I think what's really important is really focusing on taking risks, getting your story straight, and not being afraid to get out there to really kind of communicate what you want to communicate to the rest of the world, because people will listen.
Great, thank you so much. That was quite some important messaging from the two of you here. I'm so grateful to have been here with you today, and thank you to our audience as well. Thank you very much.
And thank you to you. Thank you to Rita Ghazi for hosting this panel, and thank you to the panel for an interesting way to wrap up the day at the end of the session. A refreshing change from everything else we've talked about. Usman Yusuf, please come to the stage and help present the token of appreciation to our panelists this evening before we wrap it all up. Usman Yusuf is a director of Nutshell, doing the honors for the final session. Usman, first to Rita, please. Thank you for moderating the panel. I get the impression it was your idea to have this conversation. Mahmoud Ashraf Hatem. Oh, no, we're going to... Ladies first. Sharon Azaldine, the founder of Honour UK. And a souvenir from Mahmoud Ashraf Hatem, the partner of Synergies, Middle East and Africa. Round of applause once again, ladies and gentlemen, for our final session of the day. Thank you very much to the panel. And that is the end of the session for today, ladies and gentlemen. Slightly more sparse room than we began, but thank you all for staying, and I appreciate your being here. Tomorrow morning, we're going to kick off hard with another session on digital. The session will be entitled The Digital Future. So please be there for that. It will kick off at the usual hour, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you then. Thank you very much.